Hi everybody. So in this video we're going to talk about solving quadratic inequalities still, okay? But now we're going to talk about how to solve them graphically, okay? So we're just going to look at a couple examples where they're pre-graphed, and then we'll do an example where we create the graph ourselves, okay? So here's a graph, okay? And it says for what values of x is y greater than 0? Okay, so we're going to look at the part of the graph where the y values are greater than 0. Okay, so we know that y is greater than 0 above the x-axis. So that's going to be this part here. Okay. Oh, I'm sorry. It says less than or equal to 0. Just kidding. Not that part. So it's going to be less than or equal to 0, actually, right below the x-axis. So that's going to be this part here. Okay. And so we're just going to give the x values that go with this part of the graph, okay? So you can see that this part of the graph is between -2 and +2, okay? So we would say between -2 and 2, okay? And we're going to give our answer in interval notation, right? Because we just learned about interval notation. So between -2 and 2, that means our left endpoint is going to be -2, and our right endpoint is going to be 2. Okay, you can even imagine this as looking at part of your number line. Okay, because it's or equal to 0, that means we're including these x-intercepts, and we're going to use the brackets to show that we're including them. Okay. All right, let's look at part B. Okay, so this says for what values of x is y greater than 0. Okay, so this is the part that I started to shade. Okay, this part has y values that are greater than 0, but this part also has y values that are greater than 0. Okay, so we're looking at both this part and this part. Okay, so for the left part, what are those x values? Well, they start here and they go off to the left. Okay, so there's no left endpoint. Okay, and my right endpoint is -2. Okay, now remember we always use parentheses with infinity. Okay, and for -2, because we're including the point where it's 0, we're going to use the brackets. Okay, so for this piece over here, we're going to start here at 2. Okay, and it continues off to the right, and forever, so it goes off to infinity. Again, we always use parentheses with plus or minus infinity. Okay, and because we're greater than or equal to, I'm going to use a bracket here. Okay, remember from the first video in this section, when you have two different intervals, you can combine them with the union. Okay. All right, let's look at another graph. Okay, so we have this graph here. Okay, it says for what values of x is y less than 0. Okay, so that is similar to the question that we asked in part A last time, which was where is it less than or equal to 0? So here the difference is that we have less than 0. Okay, so where is this less than 0? Okay, well that's going to be below the x-axis, so it will be this part here, right, and this part here. Okay, so it's less than 0. You can see that this part goes off to the left, so it's coming from, there's no left endpoint, right? It continues off this way up to this point, which is -1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Okay. Okay. We always use parentheses with negative infinity. Okay, and now because we have just less than, we're also going to use parentheses here. Okay, now here we're starting at -1. Okay, and it's going to continue off to the right, so that's going to go off to infinity. We always use parentheses with infinity. Okay, and because we have less than, we're going to use parentheses here as well. Okay, we have two intervals. We're going to combine them with the union. Okay. This says for what values of x is y greater than 0. Okay, so y is greater than 0 above the x axis, right? So that's going to be this part of the graph. Okay, and we're going to read off the x that goes with this part of the graph. So we can see it starts here at -6. Yep, that's -6. Okay, and it goes up to -1. Okay, because we have strictly greater than and not greater than or equal to, we're going to have parentheses. Okay. All right. So these don't look like the quadratic inequalities that we were solving in the first part, right? We can see that these are graphs of quadratic functions, so it's related in that way. But these are not worded the same way that we were wording the other ones. So let's look at how we would solve something that was worded the same way. Okay. So this says the graph of this function x squared plus x minus 2 is shown. Okay, so here's that graph. Okay, and then we want to solve x squared plus x minus 2 is less than or equal to 0. Now you can see that this is worded exactly the same as when we were solving them algebraically. Okay, I just want to remind you guys of what this question is asking. Okay, this stuff all together is y. So this is really asking you, okay, where is y less than or equal to 0? Okay, that's what this question is asking you. Okay, this stuff is y. Look, here it is. It's equal to y. So it's asking you, when is y less than 0? Okay, so less than 0 is below the axis, so that's going to be this part here. Okay, and we're just going to list our x values that go with that. So our x values start at -2, okay, and they go up to 1. Okay, because we have less than or equal to, we're going to include those x-intercepts by using the bracket. Okay. All right, so let's look at part B. It says, when is x squared plus x minus 2 greater than or equal to 0? So remember, this is y. So what this is really asking you is that y is greater than 0. Okay, when is that happening? Well, here's a part where y is greater than 0. And here's another part where y is greater than 0. Okay, so for this part over here, we're going to go from -infinity up to -2. I'm going to give myself more room. Okay. We always use parentheses with -infinity. Okay. And because it's greater than or equal to, we're going to include. Okay. Right, so the other piece starts here at 1. Okay, and it continues off to the right, so that's going to go off to infinity. Okay, always use parentheses with infinity. And because it's greater than or equal to, we're going to use a bracket. Okay, and whenever we have two different intervals, we combine them with the union. Okay, let's look at another graph like this. Okay, it says the graph of y equals 2x squared minus 4x minus 30 is shown. Okay, so here's that graph. Okay, and we are supposed to solve 2x squared minus 4x minus 30 is greater than 0. Okay, so when is this going to be greater than 0? Remember, this stuff is y, so they're asking you for y greater than 0. Okay, where is y greater than 0? Well, here it's above the axis, and here it's above the axis. Okay, and we're going to write down our x values that go with this part of the graph. Okay, so this is coming from the left, -infinity, up to this point, which is -1, 2, 3. Okay. Always use parentheses with negative infinity, and because it's greater than, we're going to use parentheses here as well. Okay. Now for this part, we're going to start here at 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Okay. And it continues off to the right, so this is going to go to infinity. Always use parentheses with infinity. Okay. And because it's just greater than, I'm going to use parentheses here too. Okay. Two different intervals. Combine them with the union. All right. For part B, it's saying when is this stuff less than 0? Okay, so it's really asking when is y less than 0. So when you look at the graph, here's the part where y is less than 0. Okay, and you're going to give the x values that go with that. So they're between -3 and 5. So they go from -3 up to 5. Okay. And because it's just less than, we're going to use parentheses. Okay. All right. So this is how you can answer these same types of questions using a provided graph. Okay, so let's do one example where we're the ones to come up with the graph. Okay, so the directions say solve graphically. This is important because the other direction said solve algebraically. So when you see solve algebraically, you know that you're going to need to make a sign chart. When you see solve graphically, you know that you're going to make a graph. Okay. All right. So what we're going to do is we are going to graph the related equation, which is this. Okay. Now I'm going to graph this using the x-intercepts. Okay. So I'm going to find my x-intercepts by setting y equal to 0. Okay, and then factoring. So I'm going to factor out a negative here. Okay, and then I'm going to factor what's left. So what multiplies to -12 and adds to 4? I think it should be +6 and -2. Okay, and then I'm going to set each of my factors equal to 0. Okay, and this gives me my two x-intercepts, 6, 0, and 2. Sorry, -6, 0, and 2, 0. Okay. All right. So let's go ahead and start our graph. Okay, grab another piece of graph paper here. Okay, so we're going to start by marking our x-intercepts -6, 0. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. -6, 0, and 2, 0. 1, 2, 3. Okay, and now we're going to find the x-coordinate of the vertex by looking halfway between them. Okay, so that's going to be at -2. All right. So for the vertex, okay, the x-coordinate is going to be -2. Okay. And then I'm just going to plug that into my equation like I normally do when I'm graphing. Okay. So I have y equals -x² minus 4 times x plus 12. Okay. -2 squared is 4. Okay. 8 plus 12 is 20, minus 4 is 16. Okay, so my vertex is going to be -2, 16. All right, so let's mark that. So my vertex will be at 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Okay, so I'm going to go by twos. So this will be 2, 4, 6, 8, 10. Okay, 12, 14, 16, 18, 20. Okay, so I'm going to mark my vertex at -2, 16. So -2, this is 10, 12, 14, 16. Okay, and now I'm going to graph my parabola. Okay, so here's my graph. So let's look at my original question again. Okay, it said, where is it greater than or equal to 0? Okay, so again, we are asking, where is y greater than 0? Okay, so we know that that's above the x-axis, so we're talking about this part here. Okay, and we're going to give the x values that go with that. So they start here at -6, and they go up to 2. Okay, ooh, should be greater than or equal to 0, sorry. Okay, and because it's or equal to, right, from the original question, we know that it's or equal to, so we're going to use brackets. Okay, so we just graph our parabola and then use the same skills to say, here's where y is greater than or equal to 0, and I'm giving my x values. Okay, so I just wanted to point out that for all of these questions, they're giving you values for y, right? Y is greater than 0 or y is less than 0, and your answer is in terms of x. Okay? All right. I hope that makes sense, and I will see you guys soon.